The nervous system. Don't be nervous. It's interesting, but there's a lot of gnarly stuff to talk about in the nervous system. A lot of interesting stuff. Nerves tingle and tell us of what we are not. But what are we but nerves? All right. So, the brain is mysterious. The brain is mysterious. Kind of magical. There's something kind of, I know this is a science class and I use the M word. It is kind of magical. It's a kind of magical, mysterious thing that has flummoxed itself. It's our own minds that are contemplating it since the very origin. That is reflected in the word itself, brain. The word brain is derived from a Proto-Indo-European root language. That was the early language that spread and became all of the European languages. It became the languages on the Indian subcontinent, across the Caucasus. This is old. It is very old. The notion of the brain has had this continuity in our language going back tens of thousands of years, right? This is very, very early stuff. So the word is, I don't speak Proto-Indo-European, so please forgive my pronunciation. I'm going to call it bregno, meaning skull or brain, which then in the Proto-Germanic, the early Germanic languages, became bragnon, and then anglicized to become brain. All right? So the word itself has been part of our vocabulary in a way that not a lot of other organs are, right? And not a lot of other anatomical features were named and have persisted through our language for such a long period of time. That's significant. It's significant. Like I didn't start here when I was talking about like muscle or something like that, or bone. You think maybe, but the word brain is a very ancient word. So just because it's an old word doesn't mean that it hasn't been debated. So here's just an example. Amongst the ancient Egyptians and the Greeks, there was a big debate in the 3rd and 4th century. We had Herophilus. You remember Herophilus? He was in Alexandria in Egypt. And our buddy Hippocrates, they believed that it was actually, in fact, the brain that was the source of thought and sensation, not the heart. Not the heart. Aristotle, of course, had the other side of that. He thought it was actually the heart was the seat of your intelligence. That when something poignant happens, you have like a heart longing, that your heart is actually an intelligent organ in the body. And that, in fact, the brain is a cooling mechanism for the blood, right? So he had this humoral system or whatever, and for him, the brain is a way that we cool the blood down. Now, why would he think that? Your head gets super hot. And in fact, we'll learn much later, the brain, although it's only like 2% of the body's mass, consumes 20% of the body's calories. All right? It is a very energy, it's an energy hog. very energy-intensive organ, and we lose the most of our body heat actually through the head. If you put your hand on your temples right now, it'll probably feel warm to you. Your temples, you usually will feel warm to the touch because your head is warmer than your palms or other places on your body, unless you just were like exercising or something. But even then, your head is going to be a major source of heat radiation. You had a thought?
I was just thinking, I had just seen a video of a woman who, it kind of like plays into the topic of menopause that we had on Tuesday.
Yeah.
But it was just a video of a woman at like a football game, and they were all outside where it was cold.
Yeah.
And she was having a hot flash.
Oh, yeah.
And you could see like literally the steam coming off of her head.
Whoa, that's far out.
So.
Wow. That's cool. I mean, it's interesting at least. Yeah. Probably not very cool for her. Maybe. I don't know. It's a good way to deal with the cold, I suppose. All right. Yeah. So the first real progress that was made in the understanding of the brain happened during around the 9th and 10th centuries in the Islamic world, in the Arabic-speaking world. Well, I shouldn't say Arabic, the Farsi. I'm going to talk about Avicenna next, but in the Islamic world. And the first person was this that I want to talk. I'm only going to talk about a couple of these people. Is al-Zawrawi, and he was an Arab-speaking physician who lived in the Iberian Peninsula. Does anybody know where that is? What's the Iberian Peninsula? What do we call that today? We call it, Spain. Oh, you knew it. Yeah, he lived in Spain because actually back then in the 9th and 10th century, the Islamic world had spread across North Africa and up into Spain. And so that's where this person lived at the time, and wrote a 30-volume text called Kitab al-Tasrif, which was used for over 500 years. Different types of, this described different types of surgical implements, some of which are still used today. I mean, in modern form, but the basic form of a forceps, for example, were invented and described by this person in this epic 30-volume set, which lasted through the rest of the medieval era into the early Renaissance, into the early modern era. And this was some of the very earliest accounts of any type of brain surgery or surgery involving the brain. High level of scholarship at a very early point. Following him was Ibn Sina, or Avicenna, anglicized or Latinized version of it. And this person was Persian, spoke Farsi in the 11th century. And I don't remember, have I talked about Avicenna yet? Have I not? Did I mention him in the first unit? Jay, you remember this? Oh, was it? Okay. Yeah. I talk about Avicenna. I glance off of him for a while, quite often here and there. Because in 1025, he published this canon of medicine. And this was the medical school text for, again, over 500 years. Over 500 years. Here's a page of it, like just an exquisite text. So it combined. It was innovative in that it was able to assimilate both Galenic and Aristotelian perspectives on the body and different philosophies, and then combine that with original discoveries regarding the brain. This is, so a lot is made about the European empirical movement, the empiricists from Europe that happened like 600 years after this. But the roots of it were right here in Avicenna, the work that Avicenna was doing. Interesting guy. Was spent most of his time in hiding because of the sort of turmoil in the Islamic world around the schism that was happening between the Shia and the Sunni. And he spent, he was a 12er Shia and spent quite a bit of time in hiding. Was able to, apparently, according to records, crank out reams of his writings every day. Was able, wrote faster than they could get him paper. He was able to secure paper. Is the way it was described. Avicenna was described. So, kind of a genius character who worked in political exile, in isolation, and moved around a lot too. He because of that. I'm not going to mention exactly what it is about the brain that he did, because I'm going to embed it more deeply when I talk about specifically the cerebral ventricles. That'll be useful to revisit him. But and we'll talk about Avicenna again quite a bit more when I talk about the eyes. But I just wanted to point to him now, since we're talking about the medieval era. It was not limited to the Islamic realm as well. Moses Maimonides was a Jewish philosopher and ended up being a physician to the Egyptian Sultan Saladin. So Saladin was a very famous sultan who was sitting in Egypt at the time in the 12th and 13th centuries. And while he was there, he wrote, amongst his voluminous writings, many of which were philosophical in nature, he wrote 10 extremely influential medical texts, one of which I'll just clip out here, which was a bit of a dig at Aristotle. One who is not knowledgeable in anatomy may mistake ligaments, tendons, and cords for nerves. If you remember, Aristotle thought that, did I mention this about Aristotle? Yeah, he thought that ligaments were, his whole thing that the seat of the intelligence was rooted in the heart rather than the brain, was because he found ligaments that were adjacent to the heart, and he believed that those were nerves. He confused nerves and ligaments and was not able to, and that was part of why he thought that the heart was the organ of intelligence. And Maimonides said, well, you don't really know what you're talking about, Aristotle. Try again, buddy. Okay. So that was a brief tour through the Middle Ages, which was pretty much all the action was happening in the Islamic world. So the next little section here is going to be looking at the rise of empiricism and how that was able to give us the neuroanatomical foundation that then would later become what we today call neuroscience. So back then, it was not about physiology as much as it was anatomy, right? Like just understanding what we're even looking at when we're looking at the brain, and do it being based upon empirical observation. Because prior to this, there hadn't been good descriptions of the anatomy, right? dissection wasn't happening, and it's hard. Most people didn't even know what a brain looked like, right? Visually, they wouldn't have known what was in there. Person dies, they bury him, it's done. Okay, so the first person I want to highlight is this guy, Alessandro Benedetti from Padua in Italy, which ended up being a really important nexus. Padua was super important. He created this Teatro de Anatomica, and which is what we're seeing here in Padua. And he was a little bit later actually in the early modern era, late medieval ages, 1450 to 1512. So this is really the roots that in 1497, 5 years after Christopher Columbus came over and wrecked the party. This guy Benedetti was using anatomical dissection as a performance, right? It was performative for him. A little bit of a look at what I can do. Look what knowledge you can gain through the application of your own senses in the human body. And he was trying to use his erudition as a performative way to kind of promote himself. And the way this would have worked is right in the middle here, there would have been a body laid out, a bunch of candles around to light up this room. And then around each of these would be, these balconies. You would stand and you would look straight down. This is very vertiginous. It's like a long, tall column of a room, right, with layers up, and up. I've never been there. I would love to go and see that someday. Kind of an interesting place. But you basically would be looking straight down over the top of the whole thing, down at the dissection that he was doing. And a quote from him from the time is, "By means of the nerves, the pathways of the senses are distributed like the roots and the fibers of a tree." So he's just giving a basic structural description of the nervous system, really the peripheral nervous system, how it's coming out of the spinal cord like the roots of a tree and arborizing as it spreads outward. So this notion of anatomy as a performative art is going to become an important theme. Here's our old buddy Andreas Vesalius. We've talked about him quite a bit. We've looked through his books in special collection. So he began to really advance the widespread understanding of neuroanatomy by not only doing these careful dissections, but by making exquisite drawings of them, so that now, if you can't be in the Teatro dell'Anatomica or something like that, if you can't be in Padua or wherever, then you can look through the book and you can begin to see it. And as you see here in this frontispiece of his work, what do you notice about this? What is this? Where are they? What does that look like? We've already kind of analyzed this picture before, right? Like I pointed, this was Galen. He's looking back at the dog there. He's got Aristotle and Herophilus or whoever looking over his shoulder, or Hippocrates looking over his shoulder. But what else is going on? There's a crowd, isn't there? And where are they?
The dissection room.
Yeah, and in fact, what you're seeing here. Look at this. What do you see here? What is that? What are all these things? It's just a stage. These are like bleachers that were built. All of this is, it's a pop-up theater is what this is. You're seeing how it would be this kind of thing that would have like, it would be like this. It would be a semicircle that like very theatrical looking, whatever kind of thing. You could climb up and get some box seats up there. And there would just be like bleachers around it. He would do the dissection, put the pop-up up, do the dissection, pack it up, move to the next town. Anatomical dissection was partly performative. It was partly performative. And so, this gets into some of the problematic questions about body sovereignty, right? This exacerbates it. We've already talked about how Vesalius used to hang out around the gallows, would get the bodies of criminals who certainly weren't consenting, or the carnal houses where he would be digging up these skeletons that he's got a skeleton here that he obviously got from a carnal house. Who was that person? They certainly didn't agree to have their skeleton paraded around as part of Vesalius's theater or whatever. But this was the root of our neuroanatomical understanding and anatomical understanding in general at the time. And this sets like an undertone or a mood about the primacy of science versus the object, the objectification of the human body. All right. So, anyways, he did do some incredible drawings. Here is just an exquisite drawing of the nervous system that he drew. He traced out all of the peripheral nerves. At the time, this is an incredible diagram, right? So he defined a nerve as the mode of transmitting a sensation and in motion. How? Well, this is a functional description of a nerve, right? How? He would see people who had an injury. You cut a nerve, you lose sensation. You cut a nerve, you cut a sensory nerve, you lose sensation. You cut a motor nerve, and suddenly you can't flex a muscle. All right. So this was like an empirical evaluation of the function of nerves. Hippocratic and certainly Alexandrian school perspectives on the brain were kind of taking a backseat to Aristotelian philosophy, right? Aristotelian philosophy sort of won the debate, so to speak. And despite the fact that Moses Maimonides and even Galen were like, not so much. Vesalius, once and for all, said that the nervous system is actually the center of the mind and the emotion. And in so doing, kind of elevated the brain and the nervous system to this higher level compared to the other organ systems. Also, there was the question. Remember, we talked about the hydraulic theory of muscle contraction, where it was the question, and that was going back to Galenic era, where you pump a muscle up and it inflates or whatever, and we went through all that. But for all that to work, nerves have to be hollow. And Vesalius examined the optic nerve and said, nerves are not hollow. They're just not. They're not. So that's a problem. All right, the next person I'm going to talk about is that followed closely on the heels of Vesalius. Vesalius died in 1564. This guy died a decade later, Bartolomeo Ustashi. Bartolomeo Ustashi, fun name to say. Pretty cool looking hat. He was a member of the medical college in Rome, where he gained that appointment in 1549 before he was even 40 years old. So that was pretty significant. Became the professor of anatomy at the papal college, which was called the Archignazio del Sapienza. This was important, right? He was an anatomist in the Vatican. He was the physician to the Pope, which is like, pretty serious for the time. But he was also pretty busy dealing with the Pope, number one. And number two, he was, his number one objective was not illuminating the minds of the world, right? Or self-promotion, like Benedetti, right? Or illuminating the minds of the world and also self-promotion, like Vesalius. His number one objective was dealing with the guys in the funny hats, right? And keeping the Vatican happy and above all, discreet, right? Like the Vatican is nothing if it's not good at keeping secrets, right? Of all sorts. And so he had a lot of different pressures on him, but he was extremely gifted anatomist and in love with it. So he did, because of his ability as a physician and to care for the Pope, he was able somehow to get a papal dispensation that allowed him to dissect cadavers from patients from the Santo Spirito Hospital, so the hospital of the Holy Spirit there in Rome. People didn't make it; they died, and he was able to dissect them to determine why they died or how was it that they died. Right, the spirit had left the body. And he was able to get some papal dispensation to do these kinds of dissections. So he made these drawings. From these dissections in his Tabulae Anatomicae. So his book of anatomy, his anatomy book. And I should find out what that. Does anyone speak Latin here? Lacerus juvat ire per artus. I forget what this means. I looked it up once. Laceros, cutting youth, something of art. There's some. So in all these sort of Renaissance anatomical texts in the frontispiece, this would have been the front page of it, showing the teatro where Ustashi was doing his art. This is where his little dissection room and where he's like showing the different scholars the anatomy. You'll often see these little pictures of a skeleton set up with like weird, pretty ironic, dark irony quotes of one sort or another. I'm not exactly sure what that one is, so we could look it up. Yeah. Laceros juvat ire per artus. Something about cutting of youth and art. I don't know. Anyways, so he completed it in 1552. Right? It took him. I don't know, 15 years, something like that, and then it just got buried. He lived another, almost 30 years. but he like completed this, and it never got published because the Vatican didn't actually want. That's like kind of radical, right? That they allowed anatomical dissection. I mean, Vesalius is off doing his thing, okay, but we don't want the Vatican didn't really want people to know what was going on. So his work didn't actually get published for another over 160 years. It took 150 years, 160 years for this to actually get published, which was unfortunate because the drawings were exquisite. The drawings were exquisite. Extremely careful dissections. So, for example, here you're showing all 12 of the cranial nerves. This is the cervical and brachial plexus. You could talk about Robert Taylor drinks cold beer. The roots, the cords, the divisions. Roots, trunks, divisions, cords, and branches are all there. I mean, he completely dissected those plexuses. And then he's got the sympathetic chain ganglia, the splanchnic nerves. He's got the sacral plexus. I mean, these are remarkable. He's got choroid plexus. We have the lateral ventricles, the sylvan fissure. We have the corpora quadrigemina, clearly depicted there with the pineal gland. We have the cerebellum with the vermis. We have the fornix. Here's the fornix, and the infundibulum, the optic chiasm, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Lots of anatomy. We could just spend the rest of the day me just going through the anatomy of the brain off of these images from the mid-16th century, right? And you're going to see much later images that aren't even in the same ballpark as this guy Eustachi. But because of this is like the lingering influence of the church, and this guy's association there. So I just wanted to kind of highlight that as a way that religion intersects with our understanding of human health and the practice of medicine, etc. Here are just some others. And you're like, well, that doesn't really look like a person. That person looked kind of weird. They were schematic and diagrammatic for a purpose. The goal here was not to necessarily capture the artistic sort of like rendering of the feature. It was to be more diagrammatic in terms of the distribution of the nerves, and then the close correlation with different muscle groups, right? So he's showing the innervation of specific musculature and what branches of what nerves are doing that. So pretty remarkable. When this so we'll circle back to Eustachi. The next person to make a significant contribution to the neuroanatomical understanding was this guy Tom Willis. So remember, the work that he's doing, the best he has is Vesalius. The best he had. He died 40 years before Eustachi's work ever was published. So here's the Brit guy, Englishman, named Tom Willis. In 1664, he published his great work, the Cerebri Anatomy, in Latin, and then people were like, "Yeah, man, I didn't really study Latin," and so he published it in English, in which he coined the term neurology. That's where the word neurology first came from. So you can see here a pretty remarkable depiction. Actually, better than Eustachi. He was kind of a gifted illustrator. But this would have been the first widely accessible depiction, failing the publication of Ustashi's work, of the cranial nerves. You have cranial nerve 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, or whatever. You got all 12 in there. So, kind of an interesting story about Tom Willis. This is a little bit of a tangential anecdote. This woman named Anne Green was hung for infanticide. And I'm trying to remember the exact details of this story. She was hung for infanticide, but I don't know whether it was clear exactly what happened to her, to the child. Whether it was actually the woman trying to rid herself of the infant, or the baby died like SIDS or something like that. I don't remember those details, but this was back in sort of puritanical times, not particularly tolerant to women. The benefit of the doubt was not given, and it became, I'm just trying to remember, it became clear that she actually wasn't guilty, but remarkably, they hung her, but she didn't die. She just kind of passed out, and Tom Willis was able to bring her back. They cut her down, and he treated her by pouring hot cordial down her throat, rubbing her limbs and extremities because she had gone very cold, applying different poultices to her breast, and then giving her a tobacco smoke enema, not a treatment that's very common nowadays. However, then they placed her in a warm bed with another woman who rubbed her and kept her warm, so that seemed to work. I don't know. Kind of it's kind of crazy, the harrowing experience that history holds. But so hopping in bed and having someone keep you warm seemed to work for her. Brought her back to life. Okay. I don't know the subtext on this story, whether there is, but it seems like there's more here than is easily reportable. Why did she, if she did in fact lead to the child's death, why did she not want the child? Who was this other woman that kind of brought her back to life? What were the pressures Anne Green was actually feeling? I don't know. It's a story that feels like there's more there. I don't know. Okay, so next person is this French guy, Raymond de Vissousian, who was influenced by Tom Willis, French dude, that began to get at the internal structures of the brain. Keeping in mind, Ustashi's work that had already broken this ground hadn't been given to the outside world yet. And his big innovation was he took boiling oil and he would harden the brains with boiling oil, which made it easier for him to dissect them, right? Because you get a brain, and if you don't preserve it, it's hard to, how quick can you dissect something before it starts to not smell super good, right? So this was how he was able to preserve the specimen and do the dissection more carefully and at his leisure, right?
So he fried them?
Yeah. Deep fried brain. I know. Why don't you reserve the crazy thing until I got some other stuff down the road that you can put that label on. This is just what they had to do at the time. Yes, it is crazy. He deep fried a brain. That's how he did it. 1684, the Neurographia Universalis. So This work was really important for a number of reasons. And actually, the process of hardening the brain with this boiling oil, they wouldn't have been able to find this out otherwise. He showed that the white matter was not just some like gelatinous, homogeneous white goo, that there were fibers, that there was a directionality to them. They had a very complex structure that was interconnecting different parts of the brain. This was a huge insight. This was a huge insight that allowed us to understand functional distinction between gray matter and white matter. Gray matter, much more gelatinous. This is where cell bodies are. All right? The white matter, these are the axons that are connecting different cell bodies, different tissue regions of the brain. They form the tissue tracts. Here in the bottom, we have this beautiful, really beautiful depiction of the internal capsule, right? So this would be the thalamus and the putamen. This would be internal capsule. The amygdala would be down here. These are the cerebral peduncles right there going down. And so that's like all the basal nuclei going down into the pons. Well, this would be, the pons would be right here in the midbrain. I mean, that's like an exquisite dissection there, right? It's a really incredible depiction. And in this image, we have the choroid plexus. We have this is those basal nuclei that you see here revealed in the right and left cerebral ventricles. He's peeled back this is the corpus callosum, which is the fiber tract that connects the two hemispheres of the brain, revealing the fornix down there. It's going to wrap around this way. That part's been cut. So, and then also revealing the cerebral aqueduct back there. A lot of anatomy through a careful dissection. Again, this was the first time people saw this because Ustashi's work that also detailed this had not been published. All right. Still, again, before Ustashi, Tom Willis was the real artist that set 100 different anatomical ships out to ocean. This guy, another Brit that was sort of the inheritor of Willis, publishes his in 1695 The Anatomy of the Brain. So here we get this a lot of the vasculature of the brain. So this right here, that vasculature is called the Circle of Willis, named after Tom Willis. That's an eponym that you'll run into quite often that still persists. You see Circle of Willis all the time. But the basilar arteries, vertebral arteries, this is the internal carotid right there. So he's showing all of the different sources of blood to the brain, and you're getting the various cranial nerves there. All right, so that's kind of like an overview of the neuroanatomical foundations, just like getting a basic map of the brain and its structures. This was the predicate for the later neuroscience that was going to happen on the brain. So is that us? No, I got a couple minutes. I went sort of faster than I anticipated. It's cool. We'll start this part, and then I'll pick up with it later. I'll set the stage, and then we'll dig through it. The next thing that began to arise is they started taking sections of the brain and looking at them histologically, right? They started slicing up different parts of the brain and sticking them under microscopes and trying to understand what the heck they were seeing. And a debate arose. They could see the cells of the brain. They were named neurons. We called the study of that stuff neurology. Willis called it neurology. The question was, what sort of neuronal theory, what is going on with these cells? How are they actually working? And there were two theories. There was the reticular theory and a neuronal theory. of how the nervous system functioned. And that went up, its origins were in the 18th century up into the 19th century. So what do we mean by reticular versus neuronal theories? Reticular theory would state that the nervous system has a continuous structure. All right? When you would look at these histological slides, you would see neurons that were connected to other neurons. Everything was connected. It was all one continuous connected network. Connected network. Sally sells seashells by the seashore. So, for example, all of these neurons and their axons are all hooked up to one another in a reticulum. That's what the word reticulum means. So when you hear the word, have anyone heard that word before? Yeah, where have you heard it? Endoplasmic reticulum. Endo, inside, plasmic, inside the cytoplasm. Endoplasmic reticulum. This connected, continuous network of membrane. That's what endoplasmic reticulum means, reticulum, if you never wondered what that word means. And there are types of connective tissue that are called reticular fibers, right? The reticular capsule or the reticulum of an organ. Like the kidney is coated in a capsule, which is a reticulum. Or neuronal theory. I'm very proud of this picture. I made it myself. Yeah, where you have individual neurons that are separated from each other, but interact with one another. These are the competing theories, and they didn't know. We didn't have empirical evidence for one or the other, but these were the theories, and there are implications for each of these. Okay. The first piece was the work of Matthias Schleiden. He was a German dude in the very early 19th century. And this is a picture of his called The Development of the Medusa, which is how jellyfish, it's basically the life cycle of a jellyfish. And in 1838, he doesn't seem like a massive insight, but it ended up being so that all plant tissues are composed of cells. This is the beginning of cell theory, the beginning of it. He didn't fully articulate cell theory, but he said, well, all plant tissue is made up of cells. And the next year, this fella, another German, Theodor Schwann, who has such a fun name, we're going to have to come back to our buddy Schwann next time because we've hit the bewitching hour. Hey, eager young minds, it's Halloween. Go have fun.